welcome back, everybody. Great start to the presentations this morning, but just wait. About a couple decades ago, the Chief Creative Officer and President of Walt Disney Imagineering, Marty Sklar, wrote his 10 Commandments of theme park design, Mickey's 10 Commandments. Number 2 said that you have to walk in your guest's shoes. You have to go experience the park as a guest would. Our next presenter was forced to do that. Her child got seriously ill, and so she spent a lot of time in the hospital. And using her learning when she worked at Walt Disney World, she thought the hospital experience could be a much better thing. So she's going to come out here and tell us how what we do can influence parts outside of parks or outside in different areas. With that, I'm proud to present Molly Tinkerbell Piveral. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello, I'm so excited to be here today, and I do have to say thank you so much to Paul, but really I have to say thank you to Steve Burkett, because this actually began 25 years ago. And who would have thought that I'd be standing here today because of something, well, because of teaching Steve how to walk stilts, if you all didn't know that I'd be standing here today. And I also have to say thank you to Tracy Kleiner. This began with her in a small restaurant in Winter Garden. And we began to talk about hospitals and what happens and themes and entertainment and just experiences as a whole. And she shared with me about her father and his role as a physician and what he did and where he was ahead of the time in what could happen in hospitals. So I have to say thank you to those two people for bringing me to this point today. I know you're distracted by all this. I'll leave out the glasses, but the tutu and the shoes are staying. So today, sometimes the answer is yes. Well, this began in 1971 when my family moved from the Corn State, Iowa. People get it confused with Idaho. It's Iowa. And my family decided that we were going to move to Florida, and we were going to go to this brand new, beautiful place that was opening up. And we drove out to the property, and you couldn't see anything. And there we were at Walt Disney World, and we didn't know it. And so my father became employed at Walt Disney World. So I grew up going to the parks, taking it all in, not knowing that in many, 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 many years later, today, I'd be standing before all of you and talking about how what has developed in this industry impacted my whole life. So there I was as a child, going to the theme parks, watching the parades, going in the attractions, seeing the shows, taking it all in. And then lo and behold, when I was 16, last week, we fit 20 years in the last year, I'd be hired, and I'd become a cast member at Walt Disney World. And it was a magical, amazing experience. I grew up in a world that everything mattered. Every experience, every building, every sight, smell, taste, all of your senses were so immersed in the experience. And over those years, I worked with amazing, amazing people, and we had ways of doing things, right? We all have our ways, and we stand in our box, and we do our jobs, and we do them sometimes the same way every day. Well, my father used to tell me we should think about changing that. Sometimes you get up in the morning and my father would say, "Did you brush your teeth with your left hand today?" And I'd say, "No, Dad, I'm right-handed. Remember, I'm that child." And he'd say, "Nope, go back in and do it again. Make yourself uncomfortable." And so I started to think about that and what I learned at Disney. And so we're out on a parade route one night, and we're talking about POV and the camera shoots and what's going to look like coming down the street. What is it going to look like from an aerial view? And this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man that I worked with, Peter Downing, came and took my hand and said, "Come with me." I'm like, "Where are we going?" We're in the middle of rehearsal. And we went down to the top. We went from the castle all the way down to the front of Main Street. And he's like, sit down. So we sit down on the curb, and we watched the rehearsal. And we started thinking about, what if I'm a 5-year-old? What if I'm in a wheelchair? What am I looking at? So maybe all of the complicated things that we did every day from a choreography standpoint, we could minimize a little bit so that we could talk about what the child on the sidewalk was experiencing. And that resonates. That resonates in every decision that we should make from an experience standpoint, from a themed standpoint. We should do that. So I left entertainment and I moved on to community relations, and I continued to grow in all the things that I could take in from Disney. And then I moved on to education. I left Disney after 20 years, and I began working in the entertainment field, education field from entertainment. And I worked with kids, and I tried to get them to start thinking about where they could take their risks and turn them into opportunities, and how I could use edutainment, which you've probably all heard, and how we could combine the beauty of what happens in this beautiful world that we work in and give them something. And so that was where the risk part of things started to happen for me. And I think what's important is that we have to think about where we're willing to make those risks. So sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes this is what happens. I'm sure you're all familiar with what this is, but sometimes we're standing out there on that tightrope. Well, in 2004, everything changed for me, for my family. This story has a happy ending. But in 2004, many of you will remember, there were several hurricanes in Florida. Charlie, Jean, Francis, homes were boarded up. Well, that week, Charlie came in on Friday the 13th. And it wasn't a horror movie that you see in a film. It was a horror that was happening to my family. At the time, my husband and I had a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. My 9-year-old had been feeling sick during the week. Feverish, then he'd feel fine, then he'd be feverish again. And I took him to the pediatrician, and they said, well, he has strep throat. Well, if you're a parent, strep throat, right? No big deal. We get home, and what happens is he starts to decline overnight, and he gets shooting pains in his leg. So I call a friend who's a nurse, and she said, well, you know what happens? You can get sepsis. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. She said, well, put some warm compresses on his leg. He'll be all right. No, the next morning, fever up to 105. Call the pediatrician. It's Friday the 13th. Hurricane Charlie's blowing across the state. And I take him to the local closest lab, which happens to be a hospital, Sand Lake Hospital in Orlando. And they said, look, we don't know what's going on with your kid, but he has 10,000 white blood cells. You're supposed to have hundreds of thousands of white blood cells. I'm like, what does that mean? Again, I'm lost. Well, we're going to put you in an ambulance. I'm going to transport you to Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children. I'm like, hold up, people. What are you talking about? I have a 4-year-old that's at my neighbor's house. She's feeding him Cheetos, soda. She's letting him play video games I don't allow. I got a guinea pig, a fish, and a dog that need to be taken care of. Who's going to do that? I have a husband, an A1 engineer, audio engineer, that's in Canada working. The hospitals were busy, busy, busy. The airport was closed. So we get to the hospital, and they say, well, your son needs a blood transfusion. Why? And they say, well, here's what we're going to tell you. Your son either has acute lymphoblastic leukemia or aplastic anemia. You want him to have leukemia. And I actually said, no, I want you to stop talking to me. What the hell is that? I don't want him to have any of that. So we made it through the night in the hallway, hurricanes slamming against the facility. They shut all the doors, and it's just lined wall to wall, kids, beige walls, horrible, ugly carpeting, no artwork on the walls. And I started to think about, what is my child feeling? He's scared to death. We don't understand what's happening, and this environment is horrible. So the next morning, the storm clears, and I'm taken into a small room. Again, my husband is not there. Airports are still closed. And they say, well, your son has leukemia. We're going to confirm it on Monday, and then he's going to start a round of chemotherapy for 2.5 years. Talk about a tightrope. But you know what? We stepped out from the platform. We're out in the center. We're going to hold our parasol. We're not going to worry about what's underneath us, because sometimes the answer is yes. And by the end of this conversation, I hope you'll see why. So during that time period, I just watched what they did, the food they served, how it was served. Each time someone came into the room, what were they wearing? Where were the TVs hung? Because when you are so out of control in what was happening with my child, I had to find something that could make a difference. And I thought, well, 20 years at Disney, the chip they put in your neck that makes you respond to everything that you have to do, still there, still there. Picked up some trash out in the hallway today because I couldn't help myself. Pick up the trash, right? You have to do it. But look how it's impacted where I've come today. And about, I don't know, maybe 18 months into his treatment, a nurse came to me and she said, when you're through all this, you should work here. Work here? What would I do? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. She said, no, I want you to take in all of the things that you've talked about over these 18 months, and I want you to do something with it. All right, I will. So lo and behold, I picked up the phone. I called John Bozart, president of Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children. And I had a bunch of people who said, you can't do that. He's president of the hospital. And I said, well, he has to pee in the morning just like I do. Ultimately, we are all the same, and we are all connected. And really what's important about any story and any decision and any box you want to step out of is if you're willing to take a risk. She's not afraid. And you have to decide where that fear will end for you. So I get John Bozart's office on the phone, and he says, his secretary says, certainly, he'll meet with you. And I said, great. I'm the parent of a great child who is very sick, and I have some things that I think you should know. So I sat down with him, and I shared my concerns and my thoughts and my ideas, and he took some notes, and I thought, well, I've made it this far. Let's see what happens. And about a month later, I get a phone call saying, we want to talk to you. And I might have done a cartwheel in my kitchen, I'm not going to lie. And I said, all right, I'm coming in. And we sat down, and we talked about developing a family advisory council. And I said, because the most important thing you can do here is think about who your guests, your customers, your clients are, and what they take in. Because I was on the other side of an experience that I didn't want to be on. And I needed to find that lining. I needed to find that place that was going to change something, maybe not for my child, but for the children to come in that hospital. So we developed the Family Advisory Council, and we started taking in all of the concerns and thoughts. And then they said, we're going to give you a job. Great. What is it? We don't know. I'm like, good. I don't know either. Sign me up. And so I sat with a laptop in the lobby of Winnie Palmer Hospital for Children, and I wrote a job description and a business plan and a SWOT analysis about all these great, business plan things. And the bottom line in all of it was, I had to get to the place that was going to change something for kids. And so what happened over the next 3 years was tray liners on a food tray for a child. Their meals started coming in Happy Meal boxes. Walls were painted. The columns outside of the hospital are now red, green, and blue. They were white before. We started looking at every single thing we could do. Can we take down this old artwork? Can we bring artwork in from local schools? And can we talk to other children about being involved in the care of their friends? And so we looked at all the different ways, and I just kept pushing, because you can be on a tightrope, and you can decide what you're going to do, and you can let it confine you, and you can let it scare you, or you can just decide that sometimes the answer is yes. If you never question and you never ask, it's no. It's always no. And we live in that place. You can't allow yourself to live in the no. You have to be willing to take the risk and go to the place that sometimes the answer is yes. And there's setbacks. Unfortunately, after 3 years, the hospital system had a huge layoff. And there I was out. And I decided, what could I do moving forward? How could I use this? And so I want all of you to think about, in your daily lives, when you leave here and you go out into the world, I want you to think about those things. Because when you walk in the shoes of a customer and a guest and a client, you will change your perspective. And your point of view, your POV, needs to be shifted at times. Because it's very, very, very easy to do the same thing every day. It's comfortable. It feels good. There's no risk. It's not scary. No, you got to get out of that. You got to get out of it and find your story that will bring you to that place that you can make a change and take a risk, and don't be confined by that. So I would have liked to challenge you all to think about, maybe this is a new line of business. Maybe you go back to your towns, your cities, and you think about the local hospital that's there. Because if I can ask all of you a question, when you go to a hospital, what do you first think? What do you first see? What do you first hear? Anybody?
Insurance card, please.
Well, that's part of it. That's definitely part of it. What do you see? It's sterile. What else? It's antiseptic. White. It does smell bad sometimes. What if it didn't? What if it didn't? What if when you walked into a hospital, the emergency room smelled like the Main Street Bakery? Wouldn't that be delightful? What if a 5-year-old came in and thought, I can do this. I can do this. It smells like a chocolate chip cookie in here. Who cares if I'm going to get 2,300 milliliters of chemotherapy today? I'm going to get a cookie when I'm done. You all have that power. You all create beautiful, 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 beautiful stuff every day. But I want you to think about moving out of where you are. Take it to a new place. Maybe it's a new line of business, but maybe it's an opportunity for your team, your group, to do something pro bono. Maybe you think about one thing we could add to a hospital. Maybe it's a mural, maybe it's different lighting. And you take your team in and you do some team building, and you do this once a year. And then you're going to reap benefits beyond anything you could imagine. Anything. And you will have changed the experience. You will have lived up to what this industry is known for. TEA will have a whole new meaning in the experience world because you will have stepped outside of where you are every day. And you will create some of that beautiful magic. What I love today is that in this room there are people from Wizards and Mice and Whales, and we're all here together because we are creative and talented and smart. So I want you to find where your risk is. I want you to find your tightrope. Get yourself a parasol. Don't worry about the alligator underneath you. And step out onto it and take a risk. Because I can promise you, sometimes the answer is yes. And as many lives as you could change, it will change you. And that's really what I want you to take away today. I want you to think about what you can do and how you can change it, and why sometimes a pair of sparkly shoes and a tutu and some glasses are super important. Because sometimes it just changes everything.
I want to open it up to question and answers, but I wanted to add one little thing about Molly that you don't know.
Maybe I don't know.
Oh, you know. June 12th of this year, I was on my way to China, and I think I changed planes in Chicago or San Francisco. It was a night flight, and I got a text message saying, stay out of downtown, there's an emergency happening. So when I got to China, found out about the Pulse, the Pulse massacre. The mayor's office called Molly to help tender all of the victims' families. The only person that they called outside of the first responders to help do that. So, terrific.
What I will add to that, thank you, is that from that, I met with a group of people in Orlando that belong to an organization called Slice. And we met because they wanted to do something to help rebuild the Pulse nightclub. And so I reached out to the owner of Pulse to tell her that there are these beautiful, beautiful, talented people that wanted to come together and think about what they could do to help. And it was outside of what they normally do. They're going to build a brand new nightclub in Orlando and give some creative input on how they could memorialize and honor what happened in Orlando, the terrible, terrible thing that happened in Orlando. And I just was so honored to be able to talk to them about what they could do and how they could bring their creativity to heal. Because in all of this, connectedness is so important. Stories are so important. Those relationships that keep us going are so important. And that's what's going to happen as a result of some horrible tragedy in our beloved city. So I just was grateful to be able to play a small part in that.
Great. Thank you, Molly.
Questions?
Questions for Molly. And please wait for the microphone if we can, so everyone can hear the question. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, there you go. So my question is, how did you, in your work with the hospital, work with the doctors and convince them that these changes were needed? Because with things like, especially like their patients' welfare and their care and making sure they're all good, doctors will really only trust doctors. So how did you fit yourself into there?
What's your name?
Allie.
Allie, hello. I think what I did was I started making appointments with the residents, because it is a big, big missing piece of training in the hospital industry that we don't talk about experience. So I sat down with the residents at Arnold Palmer, because it is a huge teaching hospital, and I asked them to talk to me about why they went into the medical field and what did they want to do. And they said, well, I want to heal people. I want to make kids better. And I said, well, part of making kids better is taking in all of your surroundings. And I brought a group of people into the room. I brought in housekeeping. I brought in a nurse, a doctor, someone in dietary, every piece of the puzzle, the lab. And I said, okay, so housekeeping, go outside. Well, now the room's dirty. Dietary, go outside. Now the patient doesn't have any food. Doctor, go outside the room. We all need each other. And getting them to understand was really getting a conversation with the physicians at the top and getting them to understand. And I did rounds with the doctors. And I said, imagine if this room was blue. And they're like, oh, it's ugly in here. It is. So we took them into rooms where there were no patients at the time. And we sat and discussed, get in the bed, look at what you're seeing, and tell me how it makes you feel. Because there's that old, they don't care what you know till they know that you care. And I can heal you in many, many different ways from a physical standpoint, but those emotional healing pieces are very important. So it has to begin with the conversations and getting the physicians to understand that basic fundamental thing, getting them to step outside of just that healing from a physical healing and getting to that whole component of the emotional, social, psychological healing because it plays a big role. So I would start with conversations. Sure.
I actually have a hospital client right now that is a children's hospital that is doing a lot of the work that you've already described, which is great. Since you've been in this industry, how have you seen this sort of like move out through the country? Are you seeing like major healthcare systems taking this more seriously? Sort of what do you think is sort of the state of the industry with trying to implement these policies?
I think it is moving at a snail's pace. It's a culture shift in the hospital systems. And that's a very, very hard needle to move. And you have to be patient and diligent and relentless for the outcome to be seen of how important it is. Because the shift has always been get them in, get them healed, get them out. All of this other stuff doesn't matter. So it's the relentless pursuit, really. It's coming, but it's not something that people want to be involved in. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when people found out that my child was sick, some people didn't want to talk to me anymore. So for businesses to want to go into hospitals, unless they're, bringing in their machines or their pharmaceuticals or the pieces, parts that run the hospital, those things that make people feel scare people. And so you have to be committed to staying to that feeling part of it to make this shift happen. Because the needle is moving, but it's moving very, very, very slowly. And you have to take it in and you have to be patient. It's coming, not fast enough, but you all could make it happen because people would listen to you from a business perspective. I really believe that. Relentless.
In what ways did you use story to help change and enhance the patient experience?
Well, I can think of a couple of instances where when you know the story and the background of a family, you can make a huge difference. So one of the things that we used to talk about, particularly in the ER, was I wanted to put little airplane stickers on folders on a medical file. And we used to call patients that were in and out all the time frequent flyers because they're there all the time. Well, don't you get some kind of reward? You all get reward for frequent flyer miles. You don't get any kind of reward in the hospital if you're a frequent flyer. But what happens is a patient, we would go in with my son, we'd be in the ER, why are you here? I'm sorry, you should know why I'm here. My son's folder's this big. He's had 70 needle punctures in his port. He's had 32 spinal taps. Do not ask me to tell you this story one more time. But at the same time, then I would sit down when it was appropriate to talk about the enhancement of the story. And when I could make that connection with the physician and say, why did you want to be a doctor? And what brought you here? And why do you want to do this? Tell me something about you. And then we built a relationship and a connectedness that then allowed the storytelling element to be real to them and stay in a position with my 9-year-old son that they could build a relationship. Because that made my son want to work that much harder to get well. And the storytelling piece of that really brought them together. We had one resident, and the residents work ridiculous hours. I'm sure you all know that. And he would come, he was a cancer survivor, treated at Sloan Kettering. And he would come after his shift with his controller, and he would play video games with my son. Now, as I mentioned, that was in 2004. And my son is 21, going to be a firefighter this December. Super proud of him. And he's still friends with Dr. Levin. He's still friends with that doctor because their stories became intertwined and they built a friendship over treatment. And that's really where the beauty of storytelling plays a complete circle role, because it keeps us all connected. And if you spend enough time talking to someone and you find out something in their past or something they experienced or something that happened, you will find you are so connected to them. We just have to be willing to do that.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great rest of your conference.